What is going on, OutLooking listeners? Welcome back to another episode of the OutLookingIn podcast. I'm super excited for this episode this week because just the other day I was joined by a young Canadian race car driver, Gavin Sanders, who's been absolutely tearing it up in the track and has been making a name for himself in the racing industry. And as always, before we get into the episode, make sure to hit that down button if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and make sure to like and subscribe if you're watching from YouTube. All right, without any further ado, enjoy the episode. All right, so Gavin, how's it going, bro? How are you?
I'm good. How's it going?
Not too bad, not too bad. Are you racing this week, or when are you racing next?
Thankfully, I'm not racing this week. It's been off the back of, I think, 5 or 6 weeks in a row at some sort of track. So, pretty worn down at this point. But
I bet.
Thankfully, a weekend off and then right back at it next week. I'm working, not driving. But
oh, wow. Well, I'm glad I got you on your week off. That's sweet. That's sweet. Well, yeah, so starting off, I mean, how I actually found out about you was I was at the Toronto Indy in Toronto, and it was Saturday, and I was watching your race, and by far, I will say it was the best racing I saw all weekend. You know, like, it was so amazing. You and Zach were going at it so hard. Oh, it was just like, I've never seen racing like that. That was amazing. It was crazy.
Yeah, no, it was definitely really fun, and it's interesting to kind of, that battle definitely, it's been a long time with Zach and I racing together. So we both kind of started when we were younger, and he, I believe, started in snowmobiles and then moved over to go-karts, and I started strictly in go-karts. So we're the same age, and we've been racing against each other for 6 or 7 years. And obviously when we both got into cars, everything kind of split a little bit, and he went one way, and then I moved into a different series. But this is kind of the first time we got back to racing with each other, and it definitely put on a show for everyone. That's for
No,
sure.
seriously. No, it was amazing. Yeah. So for everyone who doesn't know who you are, can you explain like how old you are and where you're from?
Yeah. So I'm from Mount Albert, Ontario. So just east of Newmarket. So a little bit north of Toronto. I'm 19. I'm currently attending Georgian College for automotive business management. And yes, I've been in the racing industry since I was 7. Started in go-karts and moved up into cars roughly around 2018, 2019 was when I started to make the jump. And then raced small stuff, worked my way through it, like starting off in like the Nissan Micras and stuff like that. So you can kind of imagine, obviously lower level race cars, and it's more for the beginner aspect of it. So you get a lot of people like me who have, at that point, I was almost 8 or so years of experience in go-karts and then jumped into a car. And then you have people who are brand new, right? So it can be a big disparity in terms of what people are doing and the mentalities of it as well. It's definitely something to work through.
Oh, no, I bet. So as a kid, how did you get into the racing industry? How did that happen?
So my grandfather actually used to be he was an accountant, but he loved racing so much. So he started working for McLaren when they were first starting their racing program back in like the Can-Am 1980s, 70s, or sorry, it would be 70s or 60s. I don't recall exact dates, but he was all up in that program and getting stuff going. And he never had the opportunity to drive per se. But his whole family loved it, and they were never really professional, but they were involved at least. So that transferred on to my dad, and he worked for some teams and then go-karted a little bit. And then once I was born, it was kind of, okay, this is what we're going to try and see if I like it, and loved it right from the get-go. So from there, it was all full blast, and
all racing.
It's kind of what's led my family or led the whole program to be such a family sort of thing. Everybody's interested and involved, and they try to come to every single one, no matter if it's halfway across the continent. So.
Yeah, that's sweet. That's so cool. So when did you actually start in go-karts?
So I started when I unofficially started when I was 6, and then officially did my first ever proper go-kart race when I was 7. So I could barely see over the wheel and all the fun stuff. My seat was, I think it would have been like a third of what my seat size is now. I was a literal child. So
that's crazy.
It's really cool. And even being able to work with kids who are in the same position now is kind of it lets you reflect a little bit on where you started, and you see them do something stupid, and you're like, okay, I probably did the same thing multiple times, right? So it's a very interesting industry, and the sort of cycle of how everybody goes through it and where they start and everything. It's always different, which is cool, but there's a lot of stuff you can relate to.
Well, like again, I don't do racing. Like I wish I did, and I wish at a young age because I absolutely love it. But I will say I do believe it's like the hardest sport ever. Like I don't, just because of how hard it is. I mean, you've experienced it, right? But it's just because of how hard the process is of actually making it anywhere in the motorsport and anything like that. It's so difficult, right? And it's not easy because you're driving around expensive stuff. It's not a toy.
Yeah. It's no cakewalk, that's for sure. And to put it in contrast a little bit, the guys that you see in Formula One are, it's one of the best way to think about it is it's one of thousands of race car drivers all over the world that has that seat, and there's 20 of them. So you think about it the same way, even in the series that we were watching with IndyCar and even our series, there's 14 to 30 people, and that's it, right?
Yeah.
And it's either somebody, or you're funding it, or you're just good enough that they want you there, but you're one of only so many, right? So everybody, in theory, like obviously I would love to be an IndyCar driver, but at the same time there's only so many available positions. You have to be good enough, and everything just has to line up.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in it, too, right? Like so many. Yeah.
There's a lot of political factors. It's definitely one of the most mentally draining sports.
Yeah, that's what I've seen too. Well, like even talking about F1, like I mean, there's a couple paid drivers in F1, right? Like that's a great example of it. So it's so much that goes into it. It's crazy. It's insane.
Yeah, it's a very emotionally, financially exhausting sport.
No, 100%. But it's worth it, in the end.
Definitely.
It's fun. Yeah, so talking about that, like what does it actually take to be a race car driver? I know we were just kind of talking about that, but like what does it really take?
At the end of the day, it's the perfect composition of physical fortitude, mental fortitude, and then financial expertise with sponsorships or family money or whatever it comes down to. It's that perfect composition that gets you into that position. So you could be the fittest guy in the world, right? And hop into a car, and if you don't know how the car works, then it doesn't work out. Or you could be the most talented guy, but you could not care about your fitness, and that's going to be a big stumbling block. And for a lot of guys, what it comes down to is they have those first two things, and the last thing that they don't have is a sponsorship expertise, or they don't have marketing companies or anything like that to help them out. So the biggest stumbling block in our industry is definitely funding. So at the end of the day, a lot of guys who are extremely talented will get those rides strictly based off of the return on investment that they're giving the person who's essentially paying for them to drive is much greater than the actual cost. So that, at the end of the day, again, there's only so many people who get those. Thankfully, I'm one of those people currently who is in one of those positions, but there's a lot of people, and it was definitely a sort of struggle up until recently. So
I bet.
Yeah, it turns into a very large a full-time job, so to speak. So and when you're also trying to go to school and everything like that, that's the biggest challenge I find from somebody who's in this sort of 16 to 19 age bracket. You don't know where to balance it, right? And that's the biggest challenge, I would say.
No, I totally. Like, are you kidding? Going to school, trying to do work, and trying to race at the same time? Like, that's so much. And again, like racing it's not like you just get in the car and you race. There's so much more behind it, right? So it's a lot more.
There's a whole lot of stuff leading up to it. And honestly, there obviously is the Thursday to Sunday of a race weekend, but there's days and months leading up to that. It's just preparation and getting everything ready to go. And obviously the other thing as well is it's not just you. So there's a whole lot of people involved, and just making their time worth it as well is something to look at. Well,
Totally. So talking about whenever we were talking about like the financial piece of it, can you talk about like your sponsors that you actually have?
Yeah, so currently I'm partnered with the Canadian Tire Corporation brand. They're supporting me through the Canadian aspects of it. They've been with me since I was racing in the Centra Cup. And then they've also moved down to the U.S. a little bit with me in kind of a more, what's the word, sort of spokesperson or influencer role, rather than a direct, we're sponsoring this car, for example.
Nice.
before that, I had a couple of interesting sort of sponsorships. The main one that I value so dearly. They've been with me since I first got into the micros, and they kind of the owner Chris saw sort of what I was about and really appreciated it and got on board, and that would be Fat Bastard Burrito Company. It's been one of my
Nice.
favorites for the longest time ever.
That's awesome.
And it's always funny entering a new series and having to ask for sponsorship approval and see if the logo can actually go on the car.
That's awesome.
But yeah, no, they've been a great benefit to my career, as well as just so many other, like those are the two that have done the most for however many years for me. But there's been people over a single year, just most being shops that provide racing equipment or racing driven businesses that see what we're about and our whole program and want to get behind it. So in terms of sponsorships, I think you can never have too many. As long as you can fit them all in the car, that's all it takes, right? At the end of the day, you never know what the next day is going to hold. So making sure that you're backed by a great group of people is very important.
Yeah. No, 100%. Do you think that's like one of the most important parts about racing?
It's one of the most forgotten parts and one of the most crippling parts of racing, I would say. It is very important. Obviously, money talks. So in any industry, right? So it's a very hardcore and sort of dogfight, if you will, to make stuff happen. And even at like the high levels with Formula One, or you'll see over here IndyCar or NASCAR, the big problem that we face is just people not seeing the return on investment with racing, because obviously you're just basically pouring money to go burn it. Pouring money into it to go watch a car go around, and hopefully you win something at the end of the day. But there's a whole bunch, there's so many more layers below that you have to help open people's eyes to, and the biggest struggle is having the tools and the know-how to actually explain to people why this is important why this should be important to them, why this will help their brand. And that's the thing that I find most drivers lack, is the ability to make that happen.
Wow, that's like, honestly, now that you talking about that, that's something I would have never thought, that trying to, get these sponsorships to understand why. That's a lot more than
it goes quite in depth, especially with a large corporation. Like I love them to death, but there's a whole lot of it can be very complex at times. There's a whole lot of things to cover, and obviously people are just doing their jobs to help protect their business, and you're doing your job to help inflate your career, right? So at the end of the day, if it's going to be beneficial for both parties, then it works out. And thankfully I've been in that position for a lot of the whole points of my career. But it's something that it's overwhelming, and as a teenager who doesn't necessarily know much about business, or didn't start off knowing much about business and how to present all this stuff, like you could make a PowerPoint, but at the end of the day, the PowerPoint's only going to say, "Hi, I'm a race car driver," and not anything concrete. Exactly.
I totally see that. But so throughout your entire racing career, do you have any like best moments? Has there anything that's like really stuck out to you?
I would definitely say that the first race of this season, I just got picked up to a sort of talent scouting program with the same Mercedes-AMG GT4 that I was racing at the Honda Indy, but down in the U.S. in the series called GT4 America. So we were in California. It was my first ever race weekend. I had literally just come straight out of it was called a TCR car, but prior to that, I had just raced Sentra. So just these basically your normal street, everyday road going Sentras with race slicks on them and some suspension upgrades, and that was it. So I'd never gone above 100 or never gone above 200 kilometers an hour in a race car, like with myself driving. And this was the first moment ever where I was going to make something happen in this sort of program. And now everybody's relying on me because I've been brought in because I'm good, So
the amount of stress. Wow.
Oh yeah. No,
that must
now
be crazy.
All the pressure's on, right? So it was really cool because unfortunately I had a bit of a rough test day. Nothing bad necessarily, just not overall as fast as some of the other drivers. And these guys are paid professionals. Is the interesting part about that series is there's 2 drivers, so I have a teammate. So the cool thing about that is in my class, which is called the Silver Cup, both of the drivers are generally in the same experience realm and the same talent realm. So you'll run about the same speed on track, and it keeps a little bit more balanced over the course of the stint. Whereas there's other classes, there's AM, which is similar to Silver, just slower, or Pro-Am, where you'll have one guy who's a little bit slower and then a paid professional who comes in and basically brings these AMs back up to the front. So the big problem is, for me at least, with that series was dealing with the fact that there's these paid professionals who have raced for tens of years, and they've been hammering it out, and this is just another weekend for them, right? Whereas this is the biggest weekend that I've ever
exactly,
experienced
yeah.
ever. So I had a rough go in practice, and then I got to the qualifying, and of course with other series you might see like oval racing, they don't race in the rain. We do race in the rain. So it rains 20 minutes before the qualifying session.
Oh my goodness, that's insane.
So, speaking of it, I was like, I know I'm pretty good in the rain, but the biggest problem was the fact that just a brand new thing for me. And when we had tested at the track a little while ago, I was hit and miss. I mean, you're just kind of timid and trying to figure it all out because the car is wildly expensive, obviously, and you just want to make sure that your teammate can get back in it after you're done. So we went out there, and over the course of the session, my engineer's in my radio, and he's kind of going on and on about positions and times and hit this and hit that. And we got to the last lap, and I just been held up, and I dropped from second down to sixth in my session. And it was just because the track was evolving and everybody was getting so much faster lap by lap. So just missing out on that one lap dropped me that many positions. So I just absolutely went for it and kind of threw everything that I was worried about or whatever in my mental, my sort of mental attacking procedure before the session, and threw that all out the window, made sure that I was not feeling timid or anything at all, and just kind of went back to my sort of subconscious state when I'm driving. Whereas I was so amped up and nervous, I was actually driving in my conscious state, which can be good and can be bad for race car drivers. But once I got to the subconscious, the lap was unbelievable, and I was just sliding around, and everything was happening all at once. And then I ended up qualifying on pole for my first ever professional race.
Wow, that's crazy.
It was unbelievable.
That is
that would be one of my favorite moments so far.
100%.
Yeah, it was a solid debut. I think everybody just kind of lost their minds a little bit, like, he did what?
He just won pole position. Wow.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Yeah. So it was really cool, and especially to give back with that program. There's an investor that's or a team owner who just wants to see his car go fast and his drivers win. So to give back to him on that end was really, really cool.
Oh, I bet.
It was a really gratifying moment. So
was that weekend your first time in that car?
I had a couple weekends prior through the talent scouting process. I had gone to New Orleans to go do one sort of competitive driver test. So they brought out 6 other drivers sort of to test and feel them out for the seat. And I ended up winning that. So I had
nice
40-ish minutes in the car before
That's
that.
It. Wow.
Yeah. So that was I had a half an hour stint to simulate a race stint, and then a qualifying session to sort of set me up versus the other drivers. So it was very interesting to kind of launch myself into. Then we had sort of another half day, half day, so you call it. But the main thing with this whole process and with this whole team and everything is dealing with the fact that there's 2 drivers. So I won't be in the car all day. If I go to the track for a 9 to 5 test day, obviously you have your lunch break and you'll take breaks in between, and you can go for roughly 6 or 7 stints over the course of a 9 to 5. But now it's down to 2 or 3 because you have a teammate who also wants to get in and needs the track time as well. So it definitely it's a new challenge, and that's what I like about it. It's always different, and that's the good thing about racing. Whenever you show up, nothing's ever the same, and it's always
seriously,
kind of act on your feet and hope for the best.
Seriously, yeah. So like going into something like this, like obviously you said it's a very expensive car. How are your nerves? How do you handle your nerves going into that? Because you said obviously like the first time whenever you actually had that race, you were very nervous. Do you still have that now driving that car?
I think the Indy was definitely one of the first times I've had that level of nerves
Mm,
since I was racing in Sentra, strictly based on the fact that everybody's around and my whole family's there and friends and people are just kind of showing up, and it kind of gets to you a little bit after a while, especially also with the close proximity to walls and the fact that it's a street course and it's wildly bumpy and
yeah.
super rough on the car, so you never know what could happen, right? I think that was one of the worst weekends in terms of mental fortitude for me this year, at least. But since Sonoma, really, it's been kind of a forward progression. And the way I like to approach it is kind of when you make a mistake, don't let yourself make it again, because
Mm,
when you make a mistake, you're learning for the first time. You're still learning, and everything is it. You have to make mistakes to get better, right? And that's a good thing about the industry. When you make a second mistake, that's just being ignorant, in my opinion. So that's kind of what I like to target is more or less, if you make a mistake, don't get mad, don't beat yourself up over it. You're learning. That's a whole thing with the process, and everybody goes through that experience. Just don't make the same mistake twice. Is
mm,
mainly my mental sort of goal. So, and the weird thing about racing, I mentioned it before, but the subconscious aspect of it, right? Because obviously you're going in the range between 100 to 200 kilometers an hour or more, right? So a lot of stuff just comes at you, and you're not you react, but it's not a conscious reaction, right? Whereas somebody throws you a ball, you catch the ball.
right,
With
right.
racing, it's a lot of, oh, there's a light on my dash that's flashing. Now I have to shift up, right? You don't necessarily have that thought, because the light will flash on for 0.1, 0.2 of a second, and then the
Hmm.
0.2 seconds after that, you've already shifted up.
Yeah.
So the whole target of racing is accessing the subconscious purely. So then your
Wow.
conscious thought can be basically, where's the car? What am I feeling? How am I abusing or not abusing the tires? Sort of, what can I do to be better? Sort of, and thinking about, like, for example, as well, with that battle you saw with Zach at the
Hmm.
Honda Indy, the big difference between sort of just driving a car around the track on a lapping day versus racing is the fact that now you're thinking about racing the guy, right? So
Mm.
you're no longer
It's a lot
thinking,
more.
okay, how can I go as fast through this corner? How am I going to get around him, right? Or where's he going to brake? Or where's he going to turn in? Or will I get better acceleration? What do I have to react to? And you're more waiting and anticipating that than you are the actual driving aspect of it. So
Mm.
the good guys won't defer their lap time at all in terms of overall speed, but somebody who's new or learning, things might catch you off guard, and then you might break in between the conscious and subconscious realm in terms of driving, and that might hamper your race pace and also hamper your racecraft. So it might make you or it might disable you from being able to pass a guy if you're too focused on another thing, because you're not in that sort of subconscious realm.
Wow. That's crazy. Like, see, that's stuff that like I would have never thought about whenever you're racing. Like there's so
Yeah.
much that goes into when you're sitting in that car. That's
Yeah,
like,
the adrenaline will hit you, and then when
mm.
the
Oh,
subconscious
I bet,
realm
yeah.
sort of takes over, you don't really feel anything within your body. Like, you might feel, oh, I have to use the restroom or whatever over the course of a longer race, but for a sprint race like that, you won't, until you get out of the car. You really don't feel anything or think about anything you would when you're just sitting down, until you
Hmm.
get back out again, right? All
Wow. So
you're focused on is that and what's happening in the moment.
I totally see that. So getting into the car before a race or before qualifying, whatever, do you have like a routine to kind of get into that headspace?
Normally, I'll try and stretch out a bit, and then sort of do some balancing exercises. That's something we've worked on, and through coaches I've had in the U.S. and stuff, is sort of balancing exercises, calm the nerves down, and focus on your actual personal balance rather than focusing on, let's say, oh, I'm going out in the car and in 3 minutes. Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
I'm freaking out. There's other exercises that will sort of activate the brain or your eyes. So we do sort of a figure eight sort of eye tracking
Oh, wow.
exercise. So just to kind of, especially when you show up in the morning, right, at a racetrack, normally the sessions can vary from 8 a.m. to noon for your first session, right? So when you roll in at 8 a.m., you're still exhausted and nothing's really functioning yet. And if you haven't had your coffee, then you're just sitting there like a slow lump of human. So the good thing that we try to do is sort of activate both sides of the brain and also turn on your eyes for that sort of optimal eye tracking, because your main sort of inputs in terms of car feedback and driver feedback and sort of everything that's coming at you is through your eyes, through your body in terms of nerves and feeling, and then you'll also have it through your ears. So we don't really have anything to train the ears. That's more of a reactionary thing that we can do with simulator racing and stuff like that. But the eye tracking is definitely something we can work on. And then the sort of brain activation will also help the nervous reactions versus the actual pure reactions to something happening.
Right. There's a lot of so many different aspects going into that. And how about like actually training to drive, like let's say not before like a routine type of thing, but like training, are there any things that will get you physically prepared to race? Is there stuff like you can and can't do?
I prefer to do a lot of focus mainly on cardio. Biking is very good just for balance and stuff like that. Most guys I know don't focus super hard on weight training. It's a lot of cardio or swimming or stuff like that, to kind of not necessarily lean out, but to just be within the weight restrictions for the series and everything. There's a whole lot of minimums that we have to hit in terms of when we get in the car and how much weight we can bring in with us. And if you're overweight, you're just losing time, right? So that's sort of the main thing. And then in terms of preparation and mental stuff, there's a lot of like racing simulators we can use nowadays that are wildly advanced in terms of feeling and tracks and everything. And you can basically, I can just go in my basement and practice, right? So it's a really nice thing to have. Some guys have it, some guys don't like it, but I definitely prefer it just to, at least you may not have the feel throughout your body, but you'll have the sort of eye tracking and sort of picking up on sensory stuff like, oh, I see that sign. I saw that in the simulator, or I saw this bump in the simulator. And when you see that in real life, you most of the time can react within a 70 to 90% accuracy of this is where I would do this in the simulator, and that reaction will help you in real life, as well as obviously your ears in terms of hearing the tires and the engine and the brakes and everything all sort of working together. It will give you an accurate representation of what you're going to walk into when you get out there.
Right. So talking about the sim, like an example like the Toronto circuit, did you have that on your sim before? And did you? Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
So it is on there. The weird thing is, a lot of these tracks aren't publicly advertised to like your normal sim racer. But if you want to deep dive into, you can deep dive into, let's say, the manufacturer simulators, these simulators that are in the six figures. They have those tracks perfectly labeled out. So my version of it that I have at home is kind of hit and miss, and it's I believe it's a publicly made one. So somebody either scanned it or just built it off of reference, and at least gives you some visual references or what it should look like or where the corners go at least.
Totally.
But a lot of guys who are on the higher levels, like the IndyCar guys, will spend hours in the manufacturer simulator, and it'll be way more accurate than we can even get to.
No, I bet it's crazy. Like, how important is that, doing that sim before, or just working on a track like that, going into that practice?
Yeah, like for me, I try to at least get within a couple hours of preparation beforehand. It just allows you to sort of make references if there's lines on the ground or like, because everybody uses different brake markers, for example. So you'll see in an IndyCar race, they have the 400, 300, 200 boards on the fence there, right? Most guys will use that for braking and turn in references, because there's just no way that you can see. It just gives us a little bit of an edge. There's no way you can really pick up on a reference and be consistent, and it's just
Yeah.
a little bit safer that way. So it makes
Totally.
it easier for us that way to kind of, well, I broke at this board in the simulator, maybe I'll try and break at this board now, or I can go deeper, or I need to break earlier, or whatever. For the advanced simulators, it's really cool because they actually can set the cars up with all the different setups and sort of geometries with the tires and camber, caster, everything that goes into that, as well as specific parts. They can try different setups in the simulator and different sort of balances and feel. And most of the time it comes out, from what I know, to be relatively accurate, and they show up in real life and put the same thing that they tried in the simulator on the track, and it works or it doesn't work. But in certain cases, when it does work, it's a big gain, and you never would have had that without going on the simulator. So
That's so cool. That's so cool. That's like one of the coolest things. That's so sick. So really, like, I want to ask you, how has racing like impacted your life? Because obviously, you would say it is your life now, right? Like this is.
Yeah,
This
it
is
really
it.
and truly is turning into my entire life.
That's awesome. That's so
Yeah.
cool. See, that's so amazing that, because it's such a hard sport. That's the thing. So to be able to say that, like, hey, you know, I'm a race car driver. That's cool. One of the coolest things ever. I can't lie.
Yeah,
But
no, sorry, go ahead.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
It is very neat in terms of when I was 7, I never really had like an aspiration, you know, like you never really know what you want to do until you're about my age now. And the cool thing was I could just kind of, I go-kart, I want to be a race car driver. And like you say it when you're 7, but do you believe it, you know?
Yeah.
And then does anybody else believe you? And so the fact that it's all kind of coming to fruition and everything's all working out, it's a dream come true. And yeah, I wouldn't change it for the world.
That's awesome. It's so cool. So cool. So did anyone inspire you to like do this, to get into this? Was there inspiration or someone?
My sort of direct inspiration would definitely be my dad or my mom or my sister. Just in general, my family is sort of an inspiration for sort of our competitive values and how we value ourselves and everything. It's definitely shaped me into the person I am within the industry and just as an everyday person. In terms of a racing mentor, there's an older, it's not super old, but an IndyCar driver named Greg Moore. Unfortunately, he lost his life in the 90s, but he was an absolute inspiration to everyone and was just basically a generational talent. And just the way he represented himself and handled himself and sort of brought himself to the forefront of that series at the time was just super, super cool. And obviously, I still wish he was around today, but try to hold as much as of his career as I can close to myself. He used to wear red gloves all the time, no matter what color his car was. So I did the exact same.
Oh, that's sweet. That's so cool.
Like that. Yeah,
that's so cool. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. So the goals for the future, what are your goals? You know, what's the big goal?
I definitely like to make my way into professional GT racing. In terms of right now, I'd be your semi-professional or close to professional. Obviously, I'm not making a wage, but I'm not necessarily paying for anything in terms of sponsorship and all that stuff. So I would like to become a professional where I show up and I coach my AM driver or something like that in a GT3 or a GT2 car or even just GT4. Or it is want to be in that realm of the industry. I love coaching people and getting stuff done that way. And obviously it's a really cool and gratifying thing when you're able to see somebody that was struggling before become prosperous in either a technique or at a place or with a car or something like that, and you were the one who actually got them to that point. It's a really interesting and it's a sort of gratifying feeling.
Oh yeah, I bet. Well, I can't wait to see you there because I know, I mean, from the hard work that you're putting in and the racing that you're doing, it's amazing. Like I mean, dude, I would like, I also live in Canada. Like I live in Ottawa. So, I mean, anytime there's track near, I would love to come watch you, bro. It'll be sick. But my last question that I always end off all my episodes asking, and it's, what's your best piece of advice for someone getting into this industry? So what would be your best piece of advice for someone racing?
It would definitely be to obviously never give up as a general one, but you never know how close you are, right? You never, and that's something that I've experienced as well. You never, ever know how close you are to that one big break or that one opportunity or that one thing that's going to come your way and turn your career from, if you're just doing it as a hobby, into what you want to do for life, right?
Mm.
So even and that could go for almost any industry, but for racing specifically, you just never know when that moment is going to happen, right? So value everything you can and try and carry yourself the best you can up until that point. And then once that hits, or once you realize that's hit, try to make the most of it in the best way possible.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Gavin. It's been
Absolutely.
seriously such a pleasure. Everyone go check out Gavin. All of his links will be the first in the description below. Go check out his Instagram. Go drop him a follow. Go check out his racing. It's insane. You won't want to miss it. And yeah, without any further ado,